Well, careful what you tweet. An online privacy group suing the Department of Homeland Security over its recently announced plans for a system to monitor blogs, message boards, and social media sites like Twitter, Facebook.
And the idea from the brains over at the DHS headquarters will allow the government to keep data on anybody who uses any sort of news or media outlet to share, report, or stay informed.
About $11.3 million to monitor. Among that was monitoring for news media stories which, quote, reflect adversely on the Department of Homeland Security or U.S. federal government.
Whoa! So it's
Monitoring
like
for criticism.
We're going to spend $10 million, $11 million bucks to see if anybody doesn't like us.
Yeah, that's part of the contract.
And make a note of it?
Is to monitor for criticism, to monitor for dissent.
That would allow the U.S. government to blacklist websites and, according to some, break the internet.
It would basically allow any private company or person to shut down almost any website. You wouldn't even get a hearing before they shut down your website.
Whether or not those sites are actually engaged in copyright infringement doesn't apparently need to be proven by a third party or a court. It's strictly up to the entertainment industry. In other words, if they don't like you, you're shut down.
An international agreement that lumps piracy and counterfeiting into one, which has been discussed behind closed doors for nearly 6 years. And it was only when WikiLeaks published a discussion paper in 2008 that it came to be public knowledge. Last year, President Obama signed an executive agreement to get the U.S. on board without asking for congressional approval.
Even though the precise terms of ACTA remain undecided, preliminary documents reveal many troubling aspects about the proposed agreement, such as removing legal safeguards that protect Internet service providers from liability for the actions of their subscribers, in effect giving Internet service providers no option but to comply with privacy invasions.
Anyone out there who's familiar with the internet service Mega Upload should pay attention, because the feds could very well be watching you. The Protecting Children from Internet Pornographers Act of 2011. Sounds harmless. In fact, it sounds very moral, doesn't it?
What they're doing is collecting all the websites you've been to over the last 18 months so they can use it against you at a later time.
And, like, who cares about illegal wiretapping at this point? Like, now the government is pushing to make sure that internet service providers immediately hand over all this information about you, which websites you visited, what your activity is online. You're treated as a criminal, and you have to prove yourself innocent.
You know, my personal preference is for the You Are All Criminals Act, which is shorter and I think more to the point, because it reverses the usual presumption that we do a search when we think a particular person is guilty. And the assumption behind this bill is we keep everyone's data, we make the company store everyone's information for the government because anyone might be guilty.
And now it looks like domestic drone use is going to come to an airspace near you. So that means that by September 30th, 2015, drones will be flying in the same airspace as airliners, cargo planes, business jets, and private aircraft, as the Associated Press described it.
Local police departments are now using Predator drones in order to basically spy on U.S. citizens.
More and more of our civil liberties being taken away, more and more Big Brother watching over us at all times. One point we wake up and we're the frog and we've boiled. And we go, how the hell did we wind up in this state? In this police state where they watch everything and U.S. citizens are targeted, sometimes without trials. Well, this is how we wound up in it. We told you about it every single day on the Young Turks. It's happening as we speak.
The police state we live in right now is so extreme that when I read the story, it wasn't that surprising to me, right? Do you want to feel comfortable with the fact that the government or local police departments can use a drone to follow you wherever you go, no matter what? It'll hover around your house while you're in there and follow you out of your house. Check out where you're going. What are you doing? This police state thing has gotten out of control.
A better eye in the sky. They're calling it the Blue Devil.
And here's what is interesting. With the Blue Devil, what they can do is they've got so many cameras on board, they can actually take a look and know exactly what's going on over 36 square miles. They've got these supercomputers on board that do all the figuring out about, okay, we just heard somebody right over there say this. How do we follow? Yeah, in fact, they're that optimistic, they say it's going to be in the sky on October 14th. In the meantime, they're still sewing up the Kevlar.
Security says people who oppose abortion or worry about the threat of illegal aliens could pose a radical threat to America. They're the ones we need to be watching at Homeland Security. Why are conservative values suddenly being singled out as a terror threat?
People who pay for small purchases in cash, like coffee or gum, apparently that's a big red flag. Big time. But the FBI sees a cash payment as a way for you to cover your tracks, blend in with the normal folk without leaving a trace. Now, one specific area that we've been warned about incessantly over the last few years is the threat of homegrown terrorism. And it's not just a line that was repeated by officials or put into reports. No, we saw the government act on it. We've seen one sting operation after another. The Triangle Center on Terrorism and Homeland Security has just released a report that shows that the feared wave of homegrown terrorism has not materialized. The report's author actually called it a minuscule threat to public safety. This threat has been inflated, but the facts do not back up the claims. And yet, what are the sacrifices that we've all been forced to make in order to be ready to counter it? What are the grave offenses that have been committed against our civil liberties? The power grabs that lawmakers have been able to make while selling us fear of a homegrown threat. That includes Miranda rights being curtailed for domestic terror suspects. We now have an indefinite military detention provision codified into law through the NDAA that was just signed by the president on December 31st of last year. There's a bill that's been pushed by members of Congress to strip Americans of their citizenship if they're accused of being associated with terrorism. So, all that we can get from Panetta's answer here is that the evidence doesn't matter. Due process in a courtroom to prove that evidence doesn't matter. If the government calls you a terrorist, they can kill you, and the rest of us are just supposed to take their word for it. This is part of the problem. The dangers of this overly expansive global war on terror is that anything can now be deemed a battlefield by the administration. You know that NDAA the president signed on December 31st of last year? The one that codified indefinite military detention into law? Well, it's already being applied to legal rationale. But just so you know, it's already being used.